the Redneck Wizard here, just going over with you simple short video on how to use the Kreg Jig. This is the R3 version. They have a couple different versions. This is the mini jig here. It's obviously open, but I keep it in the package. This is you know, good little starter jig. This is the first one I ever had, but you know, you progressively buy different ones. I would suggest just going ahead, and if you ever think you're going to do any kind of projects at all beyond just simple repairs, go ahead and spend the money, get the little upgraded jig. It's well worth it. So what we've got here in the kit, it's going to come with your actual jig, an Allen wrench, your number 2 square drive, and then you've got kind of the heart of the matter here. This is the drill bit. That's a 5/8 drill bit with a little 1/8" countersink. I'm sorry, not countersink, pilot bit there. And then it's got the collet. I've already set the collet. The collet comes here in the package, but I wanted to explain how to set this up real quick. So if you put the collet onto the drill bit, and then you look in here, there's number markings to where you set the front edge of the collet, the squared off end, not this chamfered end, but this squared off end right here. And I'm using 3/4 wood, so I've set front edge to where it says 3/4 right there. And then that corresponds also with the jig. When you use the jig, you'll have numbers along the side here. I'm using 3/4 wood, so I just slide that up on both sides until the 3/4 lines up with the little arrow. Got pretty good zoom in on that. And so that's how I'm going to set up the R3 jig to use for 3/4 inch face frame. Right now I'm kind of mocking up a little something to go under my oven cabinet for a step stool for my wife. She's short, but that's okay, I still love her. And then you've got in here just some accessory screws it comes with, you know, a few of each size, just kind of give you some to get started with, and then your instruction booklet here. So this is the R3 Kreg Jig. It's a little bit, you know, it's got a little more features than the basic Kreg Jig, but it's got a spot for your clamp, you know, 2 of the pocket hole screws here versus just a single one. And I've got a couple of the clamps set up here to use. This is the cheaper one. It's got the large base that connects into the Kreg Jig there. That holds it onto the wood for you. This one, it does just fine. It's a little cheaper. These are a little bit more expensive. These I think are $25 a piece, whereas that one I think is $17. It does the same thing. Clips onto the Kreg Jig to hold it in place for you. You can use either one. I like this one. It's got a little bit more space in the jaws there, so we're going to show that one. Now I've got 3 pieces of wood here basically that resemble part of the cabinet that we're going to make. I've got my stile, which is going to go across, and then I've got my 2 rails, which are going to be the vertical part. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by, and if you're an experienced cabinet guy, I know you're laughing at this video, don't really care. This is for the guys that don't know how to use a Kreg Jig and they might want to start making stuff. But just to keep kind of everything on the same plane level for you, just to help you remember, I like to put an X wherever I'm going to do the Kreg Jig. That way you don't do a Kreg Jig on one side here and then you get to talking to your buddy, you take a sip of beer or whatever, and then you accidentally do it on the other side and then you've got to start over. So I've got my X's on both ends on the same side of the board, and I'm going to set the Kreg Jig up first with the thickness of the material that I'm using. Alright, so let me pop it off here real quick and I'll explain what I'm talking about. If I measure the thickness of the wood, I've got a 3/4 inch piece of wood here. That's where I'm going to set up my Kreg Jig. You see these numbers on here. I've got 1/2, then 5/8, then 3/4, and 7/8, 1 inch, and so on. Basically, I'm just going to squeeze this in and slide the gray part of the rail up until the arrows here line up with the 3/4 inch marking. See if we can zoom in on that. It's not going to work very well, but take my word for it. There's 3/4 inch marking and there's some arrows there. And so what I'm going to do now is just take and set the Kreg jig right up on the end of the board there. Take my clamp, slide it into place. I've already preset the tension, but all you've got to do to set your tension right is, if you've ever used a pair of vice grips, it's the same principle. Just set that knob until you get pretty good pressure. You don't want it overwhelming. You don't want to have to use, Thor come over to set it there. But you don't want the Kreg jig to move around on you either. So I've got it set in place now, and I'm going to do 2 pocket hole for this 2-inch wide style. That's about a rule of thumb. If you're at 2 inches, do 2 pocket holes. If you bump up to 3, 4, 5 inches, go ahead and do 3 or 4 pocket holes. So then the next part I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this Kreg jig drill bit. This is what comes with the Kreg jig. It's got a little pilot starter bit, and then it's got a 5/8 drill bit here that makes a countersink. Now, the important part on this is to have the drill bit spinning before it touches the wood. If you don't, this little pilot bit right here will break off, and then you've ruined a $30 drill bit. So when you get it started into the hole, just make sure you're spinning before you hit the wood. And it's going to be a little loud here, but just steady, even pressure until the collet here touches the base of the Kreg jig. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side now. And that's it for putting the pocket holes in one end of the style. I've got 2 pocket holes there that I can use to securely fasten that to my rails. I'm going to go ahead and do the other end. Okay, so what I've got here is my 3 pieces that I'm going to put together. Now again, this is just a mock-up for something in the toe kick area I'm doing for my wife. But what I've got here is my style that's going to run horizontally. I've got the pocket holes in each end that we did. And then I've got my 2 rails here that are going to go vertically. And what I've done on this one is I've made the marks. My toe kick is going to start 3 1/4 inches up from the floor. And I've got a 2-inch style that's going across, so that's 2 inches there. So 3 1/4 to 5 1/4. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this board over here. I'm just going to take my square here. This isn't a speed square. There's going to be some purists out there that are going to be like, oh, you're using the wrong square. Yeah, well, this one works. I like it. I've got my speed square right over there. So I've made my lines there. This is where I'm going to set it. Now, you don't have to do that. It just makes it easy when you're trying to hold pieces together and you've got a clamp in one hand and you've got the boards in the other. So I'm going to take one of my rails here. I'm going to line it up on my style. Now, the same clamp that I used to hold the Kreg jig in place, I can use here, but the only thing different is you're going to set the tension a little bit tighter and you're going to close it in to where it's using a 3/4 inch spread, because that's the thickness of my pieces here. And I've got it lined up to where my top is here, my bottom is here. There's a specific way to use this clamp. It doesn't really matter. You can have it upside down or not, but the front of my cabinet face frame is facing down. I'm looking at the back side right now, so the larger of the 2 circular discs on the clamp is going to go to my face, to the face of my face frame, which is the bottom side. And that just holds it in place better. It gets you a little bit better joint. It's going to be a lot more flush between the 2 pieces. And then I'm going to tighten it down a little bit more than I did for using the Kreg jig, just so I get a nice joint there. So we use the 1 1/4 inch Kreg screws. These are fine thread for going into hardwood. If we're going into plywood, you'd use the coarse thread. So you just go ahead and load these into the pocket holes here. And I've taken my number 2 square bit, put it into my impact driver, I'm just going to run these in until I feel it tighten up. Right there, that's all it takes. I'm going to switch over to the next one. That's it. And then once I take the clamp off, got a nice secure joint. That's the back side. The front side's nice and smooth. Probably take a 220 grit sandpaper, do your finish sanding, and that's it. That's one side of the cabinet face frame here. We'll go ahead and do the other side just to finish it out and see what it looks like completed. So again, I'm going to take my clamp, and this is where putting the lines on there makes things easier. And here's a little trick too. If you've got the lines close but they're not exactly lined up, what you can do is just apply a little pressure to your clamp and just give it a little twist left or right, and it will move the board to where it lines those up better. And I'm just going to take my screws once again, load them in, and go ahead and finish this side up. And you can tell when it's done, when the pitch of the impact changes, it'll get a little higher pitch when it's fully in there. Take our clamp off. Sorry, the camera there. And that's it. That's our face frame for our mock-up that we're doing here. So using the Kreg Jig's pretty easy. Just takes a little patience, a little practice. Get you some scrap wood and just play around with it. Alright, I hope this video helps someone out. Thanks, this has been the Redneck Wizard.